Hi, this is Laurie Power, Director of Evangelization and Discipleship at Christ the Redeemer Parish, and welcome to Talking Saints. I'm here today with my co-host, Pete Sanchez, reporter for the Catholic Star-Herald. How are you, Pete?
I'm doing wonderful, Laurie. Thanks so much. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm excited to talk about this saint today, which is what we're going to do for about 15 minutes, talk about her life and how her example can inspire us, because as Pope Francis reminds us, to be saints is not a privilege for the few, but a vocation for everyone.
Amen.
Yes.
And it's September 5th, so the feast day of?
Mother Teresa, Saint Teresa of Calcutta.
Yeah, she's wonderful. One of the more contemporary saints.
Absolutely.
And
everybody seems to love her, even people who are not Catholic.
You know, she just has had that way about her, that simple life. And I'm sure this is probably one of the saints I don't know that our listeners might be more familiar with,
perhaps.
But we thought, she's just a fantastic example of someone who just gave their life for the Lord. And
it's true.
Realized
and maybe people don't know her background. There were some things that I didn't realize. So I think we'll have lots to talk about.
Born in Albania?
In Macedonia. Of Albanian descent.
Albanian descent. Mm-hmm. And she was born in 1910.
Yes.
And Laurie, can you just share a little?
Sure. So she was baptized Gonja Agnes. That was her baptismal name. Interestingly, she received her first communion at the age of 5.5. So that seems a little bit younger than typical at that time. And even from a very young age, they said from her first communion, she just had a love for souls within her. When she was about 8, her father died suddenly, so that was a major loss for the family. But because of that, she grew very, very close to her mother, who was a pious and a compassionate woman. And she used to, though that they didn't have a lot of money, her mother used to open their home to anyone, all the poor in the city, to dine with her family. And she once said to Agnes, "My child, never eat a single mouthful unless you are sharing it with others." And when people would come into their house, Agnes, or at the time she was Agnes's mother said to her, some of them are our relations, but all of them are our people. Yeah. So I think even from a young age, her mother instilled that care for that solidarity with all people and caring for all people.
Yeah, and that will become important later.
Yes.
In her life.
Absolutely.
But she, and then she felt called to perform missionary work and left her home in 1928 at the age of 18 to join the Institute of the Blessed Virgin Mary, or the Sisters of Loretto, they're also called, in Ireland. And that is where she first received the name Sister Mary Teresa, after St. Therese of Lisieux, who is another wonderful saint. And you might hear more about her in a future show.
Yes.
Spoiler alert. But she, in December of 1929, this will also be important later, she arrived in India for the first time in Calcutta, and she made the profession of first vows in May 1931 and assigned to a community in Calcutta. And she taught at a school for girls. And she, making her final profession in 1937, she was now called, as we know her, Mother Teresa. Yes. So she continued teaching at St. Mary's and became its principal. But it seemed like she spent 20 years in Loretto, and profound happiness is what I've heard about.
She wasn't looking for anything else, it seems.
No.
But then, in 1946, do you want to tell that story? What happened?
Sure. Well, this was a train ride from Calcutta to Darjeeling. She was going on an annual retreat, and she heard what she described as her inspiration, her call within a call. And it sounds like, Jesus called out to her to basically satiate his thirst for souls.
And I think that really defines the work that followed that. In all of her convents, I believe, next to the crucifix in the chapel are those words, "I thirst," because she wanted all the sisters to really understand why they were doing what they were doing, to satiate the thirst of Christ for souls.
And he wanted victims of love who would radiate his love on souls. And he asked her to come be my light. I cannot go alone. So she heard this call within a call. And she established a religious community, right,
Yes,
Laurie?
which is no small feat, certainly.
No,
because of course
it
she had to leave the community that she was vowed to, and then get permission to go out on her own, really, to start what would later be called the Missionaries of Charity. And they would be dedicated, of course, to the poorest of the poor. And that's really what I think most people know her for, just, really picking people up right out of the gutters, out of the streets, and just caring for them, particularly those who were most abandoned and who were dying, and just loving them with the love of Christ.
She washed people's sores. She nursed people dying of hunger and tuberculosis, and of course everybody recognized her in the white and blue sari that she had on her own lovely way. And I think was she barefoot, or did she have sandals?
I'm not sure.
I couldn't remember. I would be surprised if she was barefoot. I believe
the Missionaries of Charity pray barefoot. I'm at, like, they go into the chapel barefoot, I would think, but I'm not sure about out in the streets. That's a good question. I don't know.
But she worked with the unwanted, the unloved, the uncared for. And she went out each day with communion. She started each day with communion, then went out. She had a rosary in hand, and she began her work. Of course,
yes. She needed Our Lady's intercession to do what she was going to do, of course.
Yeah.
But she wasn't alone for long, because her former students at the school where she was a teacher and principal, slowly started to join her one by one and take part in this beautiful work that she was doing.
And I knew some about her life, Laurie, but this is interesting. So she started this order, and then eventually she opened a house in other places. She opened a house in Venezuela and in almost all the communist countries.
Yes, and I think that happened after Pope Paul VI granted the decree of praise to the congregation. So at that point, she had the permission and the blessing, really, of the Pope to grow. So that's when I believe it was he that encouraged her to open that house in Venezuela and then go into communist countries. I think I read somewhere she wanted to be in China too, and that's something that just never happened.
She was in Cuba and the Soviet Union and Albania. So then but then also through this, there were not only the Missionaries of Charity. She started kind of offshoots, for lack of a better word.
So the Missionaries of Charity, the brothers first, and then the Contemplative Sisters, which I wasn't even aware there was a contemplative branch of the missionaries, but they're the sort of prayer support, I'm sure, of the community. Then the brothers, then the Missionary of Charity fathers, and then, of course, she wanted lay people to be there with her, so she had the sick and suffering co-workers, and then ultimately the lay Missionaries of Charity. Yeah. So there are a lot of people that are part of her work.
And the Corpus Christi movement for priests as well. So she really, she touched many lives and inspired so many people to kind of continue her work. And even after her death, it's still going on.
That's true.
And she, she received the Nobel Peace Prize in recognition of her work in 1979. So this movement, her work really reached a lot of people and reached a lot of souls, touched a lot of souls.
Yes, but she never did it. She never liked having pictures taken of her, and never wanted it to be about her. It was all she received those prizes, particularly the Nobel Peace Prize, for the glory of God and in the name of the poor. Yeah. And I believe I read that they typically have a very big dinner to honor the winners of the Nobel Prize. And she said, no, please don't have the dinner. Just, give the money to the poor. So,
of course,
yes, as we would expect.
Yeah, she was who she was, and she knew who God was calling her to be.
It's true.
But saying that, there was, surprisingly, I think a lot of this next part of her life came out after she passed away.
Correct. I believe people that even knew her well were not aware of this, I guess you could call what she called her darkness. So for most of the time she was working with the poor after this call within the call, she describes, I believe her letters were her personal letters and writings were published. So she described her interior life as being marked by an experience of deep, painful, and the abiding feeling of being separated from God, even rejected by him, and a longing for his love, which she was not experiencing. So she called that sort of the darkness or the painful night of her soul. But she continued, even through all of that, continued to work with the poor right up to the end of her life.
Yeah, I imagine there had to have been a semblance of hope in those moments, because I'm not trying to psychoanalyze her, but for somebody who was thought to be one of the holiest people on earth, kind of, to my experience. When I thought of Mother Teresa, seeing her on TV, this woman is somebody I want to be like. But then to hear about all the stuff that she went through, I got to believe that there had to have been that hope that what she was doing meant something, even if she couldn't experience it.
She also understood that suffering as a sharing in the suffering of Christ when he was on the cross, and he sort of, what he went through, she was being allowed to share in that on some level, and also in the the suffering of the poor, that God maybe allowed this so that she would have an understanding of their experience on some level.
I think that's well said. So I think for my own life, for some others, it's a good example of, even sometimes when there's a spiritual dryness, keep that hope and unite yourself to the cross. Yeah,
keep praying. She did not change the way she was living. She still started with Mass every day. She continued to do the work every day and to pray. I know the Missionaries of Charity probably spend a couple hours of prayer, a couple of hours each day in prayer. And that's something that they don't deviate from, because it's so important to what they're doing, really.
To have that spiritual character.
Yeah, those disciplines. There's really disciplines to being a disciple. And she continued with those, even though she wasn't getting any consolation from it.
No, and she, the lives she impacted was something else. And she died.
I think even the secular media was sort of fascinated with her, because how can you understand this? This woman going into the poorest of the poor and constantly being surrounded by people who are suffering, and how does she do that? I think that really caught people's attention. Yeah. So it's hard to, if you don't understand Christ, it's hard to understand how she could do this. So,
and I think she was one of the, when I think of the 20th century Catholics, I think of her, I think of John Paul II. Two giants of the faith, dare I say, that really provoked awareness of the church and its mission.
Absolutely.
Yes. And she died 1997, right? Close to the end of the 20th century.
And her work was so fruitful. So by 1997, her sisters numbered nearly 4,000 members. They were established in 610 foundations, so different places and around the world, and they were in 123 countries. So it's a fairly short time for that amount of growth. It's incredible. God was clearly blessing. She was carrying out his mission, you could see. There was no doubt. You'd see the fruitfulness of it.
And she's left a good example for all of us, especially, I think about being here in Camden, which I see so many people on the margins. Try to help them out. I try to carry like a granola bar in my backpack if somebody needs something, or buy a meal for somebody sometimes if they need it. So she inspires me every day.
And she was very much about that one-to-one interaction, touching lives, touching hearts, just one-to-one. I believe Monsignor Mannion worked with her knew her personally for many years, and he has lots of stories. But I remember when he's talking about her, that's what he said. She didn't want it to be about her, or she didn't take herself too seriously. He told a story that people would come up to her and say, "Mother, you're a saint," and she would say, "Oh, wait till I'm dead. I don't want to hear about this." But she was very much about being very present to the people right in front of her. So
I think she even came to Camden. Now,
yes.
I think she came to Sacred Heart.
Yes.
Monsignor Doyle
welcomed her to Camden, yeah.
Yeah, because she was talking, I think, in Philly, and Monsignor Doyle invited her to come over, and she spent some time with school students and parishioners.
Wow. That's incredible.
That is pretty powerful. I think I'm going to have to say that was either the 60s or the 70s. When that happened. I know it did happen. I don't remember
when.
What year. But Mother Teresa, Saint Teresa.
Yeah, Saint Teresa. So did we say that she died on September 5th of 1997? And John Paul II permitted the opening of her cause after just 2 years, which typically the time that you would need to wait is 5 years. But he saw that clearly there's some heroic virtue there.
He wasn't the only one.
Didn't wait the 5 years. So she was canonized by Pope Francis on September 4th, 2016. And I believe some people from our diocese were there, if I remember correctly.
I think so. We marked Mother Teresa or St. Teresa Day of Service.
That's right. Yes. I think I participated in that too. Yeah.
Oh, you did? Mm-hmm. Oh, I remember going to Catholic Charities of Camden, and we were working with refugee kids. Mm-hmm. And you were there too.
Yeah, I think so.
That's right. And our mutual friend Michael McWilliams.
Yes.
Hi, Michael. Yeah, you're being name dropped.
He will be so impressed that you just got mentioned on this podcast.
Well, I remember
Thanks for listening, Mike.
He and I were helping the kids with this little cup game where they had to pull a card.
Yes, that was a fun day. That was good.
It was fun. It was I remember it was unusually hot in September, but what a blessed day to kind of remember St. Teresa and kind of be inspired by her and continue God's mission.
Absolutely. So I called my pastor because he was a Franciscan Friar of the Renewal, and I know Father Groeschel, one of their founders, knew Mother Teresa. So I called him. I said, Father, do you have any good stories about Mother Teresa? And he said, yes, I actually do. So this was actually after her death. Father Groeschel was hit by a car. It was a very serious accident in Florida, I think around maybe 2004, 2005, not sure when, but after Mother Teresa had died. And Father Groeschel had a associate, someone who volunteered and worked along with the friars, who heard about this accident, flew to Calcutta simply to acquire a relic of Mother Teresa, first-class relic, and then flew back. And because they knew how serious it was. Father Groeschel apparently had actually been dead in the emergency room for close to 20 minutes. And then they revived him because there was a priest there that said, this is not his time, please keep trying. So they kept working until he was revived. So they said, okay, so he's alive, but it's highly unlikely that he's going to have normal brain function. Clearly, that was 20 plus minutes. This is not going to be good. So this gentleman comes back with this first-class relic of Mother Teresa, and they place it on his head. And within a short time, he wakes up from the coma, and he recognizes them, and he's able to communicate with them. And not long after that, they celebrated Mass in Latin, and he was able to respond, not entirely, but respond with the Latin Mass parts. So clearly there was no significant brain damage, and they really considered that a miracle through her intercession. Interestingly, in this hospital, it was not a Catholic hospital, someone heard about this, and there was a man there who, I think he was a Christian. A radio tower had apparently fell on this man's son, on his head, and they said there was he was alive, but there would be no prospect of normal brain function after this. And this man heard about the fact this Mother Teresa relic was here, and they also said, can we, place the relic on our son? He also was miraculously healed. Without, normal brain function, without the damage that the doctors had told him would be inevitable. And apparently there was one other person. Father had said there was at least 3 people that were healed through this relic of Mother Teresa that he had brought back from India. So I don't think that's one of the miracles that are necessarily written down in her stories, but that was one that touched someone here, and
normally you hear about them before they're
right.
But so that just goes to show you the works that she's still doing for
That's
people.
True. Taking care of her friends down here.
Yeah. Like how you said, her friends,
Yes.
Friends.
Yes. Anybody who loved Jesus, I'm sure. Well, even though she would call everybody friends of Jesus, the people she was caring for, whether they were Christian or not. The people who others would call sinners, I think she would refer to them, they're friends of Jesus. They might not know it yet, but Jesus loves them, right?
Exactly. That's what it's about.
Yes.
And can you close us out with the prayer to
Sure. St. Teresa of Calcutta, you allowed the thirsting love of Jesus on the cross to become a living flame within you, and so become the light of his love to all. Teach us to allow Jesus to penetrate and possess our whole being so completely that our lives too may radiate his life and love to others. Amen. St. Teresa of Calcutta,
pray for us.
Pray for us.